Today on Locked On Red Wings, how should the Detroit Red Wings use Marco Kasper?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News, and I am a color commentator for the Oakland University hockey team. Scotty, got a lot to talk about today, just mostly expanding on some of the previous conversations we've had in-game recaps. One, we want to talk about Marco Kasper. He had a great season debut with the Detroit Red Wings, picked up his first NHL point on a secondary assist to Vladimir Tarasenko, but even outside of that, he looked very comfortable centering that third line for the Detroit Red Wings. So where you want to have that conversation, expand, like how do you utilize him if he is going to stay with the Detroit Red Wings? We also want to talk about Olli Maatta and Erik Gustafsson. We've talked about it a little bit here and there about how their pair has kind of looked less than stellar is probably the nice way of putting it, and we're going to try and propose some changes that maybe will give it a little extra oomph in the lineup. Scotty, before we get to that, I got to let the people know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Also want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Scotty, let's start off with Marco Kasper. I think that is the belle of the ball of this episode, so to speak. That's what everyone will want us to talk about, and that's probably what we want to talk about more because it's a more optimistic conversation, I feel. Yeah, and as I stated in the opening, he had a really, really good first game with the Detroit Red Wings, a nice season debut. So my question to you is, we saw him on that third line with Michael Rasmussen and Jonathan Berggren, and they looked solid. How, going forward, do you utilize him with the Detroit Red Wings? Do you continue to use him in that role? Do you change it up? Do you see him higher in the lineup? Especially when Tyler Motte gets healthy, what do you see the best usage of Marco Kasper being?
I think it's similar to what we saw. I don't think it's necessarily guaranteed to be exactly what we saw in his debut, right? As far as like it's going to be on the third line and it's going to be with those guys, specifically every time. But I think that the role is pretty similar to what we saw. I love 3C. I'll start off by saying that. I think that there's an opportunity for him if he plays really well to even, maybe in the second half of the season or as the year goes along to maybe work himself up into even as high as the 2C role. But for right now, we talked about this all summer, right? Like we do not want to see him on the fourth line. We don't want to see him called up. Like I know there's differing opinions about development of players and what's truly best for them. I really would rather he got, 23, 24 minutes in Grand Rapids than, 8 at the NHL level. So I love third line because he's going to be getting legitimate playing time. And I think that the players that you surround with him is really kind of the meat of this conversation, right? I think that's where the conversation or the debate, if there is one, kind of lies. I really like how they made the third line and who they surrounded him with in his debut. I think Rasmussen gives you that intangible length and net front presence and kind of a defensive-minded, stable type of player on the wings. Then you have Berger, who has looked better defensively so far this season, which we want to give him a ton of credit for, but also gives you a little bit of a scoring option on your line as well. And I mean, we saw, obviously it was Tarasenko in the middle of kind of a blender / change there, but that was Berger and Casper leading to the Vlad goal in the game against Nashville. So I think that that's kind of a best of both worlds thing. You hopefully have some pretty solid defense in Rasmussen and Marco Kasper and hopefully an improved defensive Berger, but you also have the offensive upside of Berggren and then obviously Casper as well. So I think there's a chance we see that going forward. I also think, and I think what you said earlier is kind of the biggest talking point within that is what happens when Mott comes back. Is there a huge shakeup if and when both of those guys coexist on the roster? So I think, I mean, I would love to see Tyler Mott with Marco Kasper, to be honest. I think that's a pretty easy swap of really depending on what you want the line's personality to be. You could really swap them with either wing, I guess. I think I would probably swap him for Rasmussen just so you get the scoring upside still on there with Berger. But yeah, I really like it. I think, again, third line is beautiful. It's perfect. I don't think anybody really, or at least I should say most people, I don't think that I've seen have had too much of a problem with that. It's the conversation lies in who to surround him with.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it goes back to that conversation that we had yesterday, right? Where we talked about how Marco Kasper, they said 2 weeks ago they weren't going to call up youth unless there was a long-term injury. Well, there's not a long-term injury, but they have the roster spot. They had the roster spot to start the year as soon as they waived Justin Hull. But right now, with Austin Watson and Ville Husso down in the minors, they have the roster spot available. So even when Tyler Mott is healthy, they'll be carrying 13 forwards instead of 12 like they started the season with. So there's still a pathway for him to be in the NHL, and I think he should be in the NHL. And I know that you agree with me, Scotty, and I'm sure everybody listening agrees as well. This is not a hot take. We thought he should have made the team out of camp because his preseason was so good. The one question mark is, where do you slot him to give him minutes? Because the down the middle was clogged. You had Dylan Larkin. You had a JT Compher, Andrew Kopp, and then Joe Veleno. And so what ended up happening on the game on Saturday was kind of what we were saying should happen before they sent him down before the start of the season, is you just bump Joe Veleno off center, put in the wing, put Andrew Kopp on 4C, and Andrew Kopp feasted on the fourth line center role. That made it a very good fourth line.
Still got minutes because of his PK usage too, right? It's not like Andrew Kopp played 5 minutes. Like, he still played and he got plenty of ice time too because of his involvement on the kill.
And like, is it ideal to be paying a fourth line center $5.6 million? No, it's not. Is Andrew Kopp useless? Absolutely not. He's been actually pretty good since the start of the season, and he had a very important role on this team last year. So it's this is the hand you are dealt, and putting Marco Kasper on that third line with Johnny Burgers, and Marco Kasper made that third line very competitive. I know it broke up that shutdown line, and I don't know if they'll bring that back in some capacity, because if that's the case, then who do you put as your fourth line center? That's where it becomes a huge question mark, because all last season, that shutdown line of Andrew Kopp, Michael Rasmussen, and Christian Fischer had a really important role on this team, which is eat defensive zone minutes against the team's toughest opponents to free up offense for Dylan Larkin's line and Patrick Kane's line, JT Compher's line. And now, because of Marco Kasper, that kind of threw a wrench in that. A positive wrench from the game that we saw on Saturday, but now you don't have like a bona fide shutdown line unless you decide to make that your fourth line, which I think is not a bad idea, to kind of give that fourth line the identity, and like they're not just a weird combination of players like it was. Like Joe Veleno, Tyler Mott, and Jonathan Berggren, we were projecting them as the fourth line back in July when these guys got signed, and we were like, this line makes no sense. Now, it's not the end of the world if your fourth line doesn't have an identity, because they play probably less than 10 minutes a night. But would it be nice if the fourth line at least looked cohesive on paper? Absolutely. And I think that Marco Kasper in center, because he needs to be playing middle 6 minutes to justify him being here, gives you that added flexibility. And you talk about it all the time, Scotty. You've mentioned in the past, it gives you that like trickle down effect in your roster, makes everybody else, every other line better. And I do agree with you too. I think that Rasmussen and Berggren are kind of good line mates to start him off with in the third line. I don't know. I would love at some point to give him a shot at the second line with Patty Kane. But I understand starting him on the third line, and it looked good in the minutes that they had.
For sure. I think, one of the dark horse kind of candidates I have would be, if you are going to rock with the look up the middle that they offered in his debut, so Kopp at 4C and Casper at 3C, how about putting Veleno on the wing with Casper, and then on the other side you can do either Rasmussen if you want the size and defense, or again, if you want it to just be like a really fast kind of skill line, you could even put Berger over there. But I think that they might have issues with that defensively, going Veleno, a rookie, and Berger. But I don't know. I think that would lead itself to maybe Veleno being able to open up the ice a little bit too. Just,
I like that. I do like that.
The freedom of him going to the outside, not as much defensive responsibility up the middle in the transition game either. That's something that I would really, really like to see. And honestly, I don't really even care who they put on the other side.
No, actually, I really like that idea because, Veleno, I think that you hit it on the head where putting him on the wing gives him the opportunity to move up in the lineup because of that less responsibility as a winger and to showcase a little bit more of that. We know he's got speed. He's got a decent shot. I think that's a really solid idea. I think we're just looking at a future where Veleno gets bumped off center simply because of depth. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. Like you said,
that is a great problem. We used to pray for times like this. Do we remember 3 years ago when we were like, oh my goodness, we have one center in the entire organization? This is a good problem to have.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at a reality where you have a rotation of 13 forward where it's like Tyler Mott, Jonathan Bergen. I can't see Christian Fischer getting 13 forwarded. Yeah, it'd be tough to see. Maybe occasional Joe Veleno. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say Veleno would probably be the other one, yeah.
But that's not my decision to make.
Again,
thank
good
goodness.
Problem to have.
We'll head to a quick break when we return. We'll finish up anything we have left to say about the Casper conversation here, and then we'll talk about the Mata-Gustafsson pair before previewing the game against the Islanders in segment 3. Stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty, do you have anything left to add on the Casper thing? I think I've mostly said my piece.
Yeah, I think so too. I think really the biggest point that we have driven home and continue to drive home is just like we want him here playing minutes in the middle six. Like if you can just find out a way to keep that going, and like the last thing I want is for him to be a yo-yo player where it's just like sent up and down, just the guy that they call when somebody's hurt and then he goes right back down. I think that would be a crime. So I think that my biggest thing is just like, he's here, keep him here, figure it out. You opened a roster spot with the Husso thing. We haven't gotten really much of an update on that. We'll see how it plays out, but I think that's kind of just my biggest take is mix and match, see what kind of play styles and personnel work with them, but do it up here.
Yeah, he makes the team immediately better. And, let's not get it playing in the third line, which is, I think, a great way of starting him off, maybe eventually moving up the second line, but JT Compher's got that locked down for the time being. And JT Compher's been good in that role, not trying to immediately steal that role, but Casper eventually, you would hope, can push that role, he or Nate Danielson. But in that game against Nashville, he didn't play no minutes. We talked about it, right? He played 12 or 13 minutes in that game. He had power play 2 time. And this is what's so crucial out of Marco Kasper. He got even deployments, offensive and defensive zone. He's touted as a two-way center.
Right. That's the whole point of Marco Kasper. That's like the whole point. That's like every single reason as to why there's hype around him, why they drafted him, and why he's here.
Like, they were able to play him comfortably in both zones. Now, granted, again, they weren't putting him out there against Ryan O'Reilly. I think he did have the most ice time against Yossi, but that's because Yossi's the number 1 D-man. Yossi's going to have the most amount of ice time against everyone. Yeah. I think following that, he had the most amount of 5-on-5 ice time against Mark Jankowski, Brady Shea, Colton Sissons, guys of that nature. Other third and fourth liners, which is fine. You that's what you want when they're your third line guy.
He's a rookie,
so,
man.
Yeah. So I thought, with all that being considered, him still finishing with the 5th best expected goals for percentage at 5-on-5 in that game, and one of 5 to finish with over 50% expected goals for percentage, when that was a game where after that 5-on-3, the Predators crashed hard to try and get their first win of the season at home because they were desperate, is honestly is honestly impressive. It honestly is impressive. So he had a really good first game. I think he's earned himself another game. I also don't know. I would like to think that they wouldn't call him up unless they think he's going to stay a while. But at the same time, like, they also contradicted themselves already with the whole, like, we're not going to call him up unless there's a long-term injury. And as far as we know, Tyler Mott's injury is just day-to-day. And he's a winger, not even a center. So, I don't know.
We'll see. But again, they did open they did open a roster spot with the Husso move. So, there hasn't been a follow-up to that either.
Right. And Justin Holt can still get sent down without waivers for at least a little bit longer. So, I mean, they got the roster space for it. It's just whether or not this is a short-term stint or a long-term stint. And God willing, it's a long-term stint. So,
absolutely.
Anyway, Scotty, Olli Maatta and Erik Gustafsson have not been very good as a pair so far this season. Erik Gustafsson, in particular, has been pretty brutal. And the question becomes, like, what do you do with a third pair that is even worse than your... That's the thing, right, too? We brought in Gustafsson. We were like, okay, he's going to be better defensively. Metrically, he was better defensively last year. And historically, he's better defensively than Shane Gostisbehere. He's like, won't get as many points, but he'll help make the defense marginally better. Well, he has not done that. And so when you have a third pair that's already super sheltered and your guy you brought in to quarterback your PP1 is not playable as it stands, what do you do?
It's tough. So here's the two sides of my brain arguing with each other. Okay, so on one side, I have
wolves inside him.
Yeah, dude. So on one side, I have the argument of, okay, well, he has struggled. He has played really poorly, like on both sides of the ice, and that's almost like an understatement. He has really struggled. He's been one of the least productive players on the wings so far this season. So, like, there is absolutely an argument if you're just like, he should be healthied. I think that if you are truly going into every game with the mindset of who are the 6 best defensemen on the ice, it's really hard to do the mental gymnastics to justify him being one of those top 6 based on what we have seen up to this point. I mean, heck, Justin Hall is like getting fans back this year. That's something that was only a figment in our imaginations over the summer. So, like, he has really struggled. And I think that there is one half of my brain that's just like, if he's been the least productive defenseman of the 8 that you have, then, like, he probably shouldn't play. There is another part that is like, it's still very early in the season.
Correct.
I think you should probably try and salvage the signing and not just completely throw it to the wayside. Now, that doesn't mean that you pound your head against the wall and stick with it no matter what throughout 82 games. But I think that there is a very strong argument and conversation for, you know what? We're going to put him on third pair again, but we're going to change up the personnel and we're going to put him with somebody else because clearly him and Maatta hasn't worked, but we're what, 5 games in to his contract and to his deal and his Red Wings tenure. If there is any, if it is salvageable and you can get the most out of him, you have to find out how to do that as soon as possible. You have to find out how to get the most out of this guy ASAP. And if you try and put him with I don't know, with one of the veterans on the roster, or you put him with Aljo, like there's a few different guys you can certainly argue, but I just feel like rolling him out there in the third pair with Olli Maatta is just a disservice to everybody. Like that's 0 for 2 on both of the arguments I just laid out, whether you're, no matter which, side of the aisle you're on there. So that's kind of where I stand. I'm constantly in a debate with myself about, like, well, if it's truly the top 6, then he shouldn't play tomorrow. But, like, at the same time, if you do want to try to see if there's any way he can be good, then I think you probably have to keep playing him and just change who he's on a pair with.
Yeah, I mean, they are consistently, when they're out there, giving the puck away or getting hemmed into the zone and just routinely getting caved in, despite being obviously the most sheltered pair on the team. They were going to be the most sheltered pair to begin with because they're third pair, even more so because of the type of player that Gustafsson is. And yet, they have pretty solidly. Now, again, this is through the first 5 games, but they have a pretty comfortably negative Corsi for percentage relative compared to their teammates, despite getting softer competition compared to their teammates, their contemporaries. So it's like same problem we ran in last year with Shane Gostisbehere and Olli Maatta. And let's not absolve Olli Maatta of any guilt either. Like, Olli Maatta has not done anything to make the lives of his partners any easier. Sure. Like, I understand it's a tough to be asked to kind of be the safety net, but he has not been a good safety net. Now, I have liked him like jumping up into the play and trying to provide a little bit more offense. That's been nice to see, but just overall, this pair has been unplayable. And Gustafsson, I agree, is kind of the leading candidate right now for that. But that being said, like you said, it's 6 games into the season. Right now, it seems like that pair is unplayable. But there's a lot of time for them to adjust and gain chemistry. And because the biggest sticking point that I have is Gustafsson is not used to playing on the right side. He's not. And they're asking him to play on the right side as a left shot of a guy who's always played throughout his career on the left side. So my proposal here to help Gustafsson, because was it Lalonde or Yzerman said, like, some guys can, some guys can't play on their opposite side. You either play him with, and this would mean scratching Olli Maatta, which is fine. Like, he's a third pair D-man, so who cares if you're just messing around trying to get things to work. You put Albert Johansson back out there on the right side because we know he can play offside. He did it with Simon Edvinsson last year. And you put Gustafsson on the left for 1 game. Just try it out. I'm not saying this is your pair, but this will give Gustafsson the ability to go back to the side he's comfortable on, and you might see his play improve. Now, obviously, you're putting a lot then on Johansson as a rookie to be a safety net for a guy who has been historically not very good this season, but it's worth trying because at some point you got to try some things, and Johansson has earned himself more starts. Or you put Justin Holl, who is a right side D-man, on the right side now because Jeff Petry's back. You can bump Holl back down, or you can put Holl in the second pair, which I don't recommend, but you could, and put Petry down. Like, now you have options because your defensemen are healthy again. Utilize those options instead of trotting out the same sheltered defensive pair, bashing your head against the wall and wondering why your head is bleeding. Like,
yeah, you
let's
have
do
8
something
for a reason, man. Like, we complained about it all summer. You walked into opening night with 8 defensemen. You still have 8 defensemen. You might as well shuffle some things up and when things go bad and see what will work.
Like, I just want to see, before writing Gustafsson off, even as poor as it feels he's played to us, before writing him off, I want to see him on his natural side to see if that's the big reason why he's looked so tough. Because it is hard if you're not used to doing it. It really is. But
yeah, I agree.
All right, cool. Scotty, we'll take another quick break. When we return, we'll preview the game against the New York Islanders. Stay tuned. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality candidates compared to the other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockdown. Just go to Indeed.com/lockdown right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockdown. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Indeed you do.
Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty, Red Wings are playing the New York Islanders, the team that I despise with every fiber of my being.
Yeah, take it away, man. How do you feel about the Islanders?
They're just boring. They're boring. They play at 7:45 too on FanDuel Sports. Now, actually, I don't even know if that's technically FanDuel. I just want to remind people constantly that that's what they're playing on these days because it's no longer Bally Sports. But it is a 7:45 puck drop, and that is because it is Frozen Frenzy again. They did that once last year. Every team in the NHL is playing, so there'll be 16 games, and all it does is inconvenience the rest of us. So, cool.
I mean, it could be good for the sport.
It is on FanDuel Sports Network, by the way. I did just double check and confirm that. Yeah, the Islanders are 2-1-2 on the season so far. Scotty, they are who we thought they are, honestly. Like, they're not really all that different. Right.
Yeah.
Noah Dobson leads their team in points, 4 assists, 5 games played. As much as the Islanders bore me, I love Noah Dobson. I think he's one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. Hey, listen, I can enjoy one player on a team I otherwise despise.
Man.
Anthony Duclair is behind him with 3 points in 5 games, and I think he is tied for team leading goals, along with a handful of other players at 2. Not a lot of statistics to break down. So
he was also on the injury report, so we'll see how he's feeling on Tuesday.
Yeah.
This team is like you said, they are who we thought they were. This is a team that has not scored very many goals, but has not allowed very many goals. They have one of the best goalies on the planet, whereas his usage has been kind of weird. We were talking about that pre-show, how his utilization's kind of been weird, but his most recent outing was a 1-0 loss in overtime. So he had a shutty through 60, and the Blues beat the Islanders 1-0 in OT. And then, so we're assuming that Shesty's going to be in that. I guess, I don't know. Again, his usage has been kind of weird. He doesn't lead the Islanders Islanders goalies, that is, in games played so far, but he had some injury stuff coming into the season. Goodness, and whatnot. So yeah, I'm assuming we'll see him. I'm assuming it'll be a pretty. I don't know, maybe like similar game to what we've seen at certain points already this year. Like, this is going to be a really good goalie, a really good suffocating defense, probably some low event hockey. And now that I say all that, it'll be, 11-9.
Yeah. So, I mean, the data backs you up, but that doesn't mean karma supports you. The Islanders are bottom 10 in the league in goals for per game so far. They're top 10 in the league in goals against per game, and preventing goals, I should say.
Right.
So they're top 10 in goals against per game played at a low rate. So they're one of the best in the league at preventing them. They have a bottom 10 power play, and their penalty kill is like 30th to 31st. Now, again, this is a very young season still. So one good game could completely skew those statistics, and they could be back at like 12 by the end of the game tomorrow on either of those statistics if they pop off. And we know the Red Wings special teams has been nothing to write home about, but like both teams' special teams has not been great. But the one thing that the Islanders do well, as you already said, is play defense. They don't score a lot, but they play good defense. Along with those goals against per game and goals for per game, they're a top 10 team in expected goals for percentage, at 6th overall, because they're a very good possession team. And at Corsi for percentage, which is just shot attempts at 5-on-5. Again, reminder that when I say expected goals for percentage, always know that it's at 5-on-5 that I'm referring to it as. They are 11th in the league. So they just are a really good possession team that suck on special teams. Well, you're a really bad possession team that also sucks at special teams. And they have the better goalie. So it's going to be a boring game. And like you said, because we've both said that, it's going to be 11-9 is going to be the final.
It's going to be electric.
The only reason I can think, Scotty, as to why Sorokin has only played 2 games so far is that's because he was injured coming into the season. And so they're just like ramping him up. Other than that, I don't know. Nice light show.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I have no clue either. I would imagine you're right, but Locked on Islanders, great show. Maybe.
Yeah, happy birthday, Gil. By the way, it's his birthday.
Happy birthday, Gil, man.
Technically yesterday, by the time, but Monday was his birthday.
Yeah, I guess on Monday.
Yeah. He's also host of Locked On NHL, so check that out as well.
Legend.
Yeah, Scotty. So game plan. What's the X factor here? What do they got to do?
Score goals.
Heard it here first, folks.
I mean, like, obviously that's like half a joke, but
Right.
that's the type of team you're playing. Like, this is one of my favorite screen shots of all time. This is like 10 years ago, probably. Joe Buck was broadcasting a Royals game, and it was Joe Buck's keys to the game, and the first one was score more runs than the other team. And that's just like, that's how I like. It's kind of how I feel. Like, this is a suffocating defense and a really good goalie. It means it's really hard to score goals. And the offense isn't very good. Well, the Wings defense isn't very good. So, like, this is, or at least hasn't been very good so far this season. So you're talking about a rock and a hard place here. And I think that truly the only way that they're going to get out on top is if they can break the seal early and be one of the only teams over the last year or two that's been able to put up a crooked number on the Islanders, which is few and far between. So
I think to piggyback on what you were saying about goal scoring, I do think that special teams is going to play a huge role in this game because while your special teams hasn't been great to start the season, theirs has been worse. And so if you're not going to win the possession battle at 5-on-5, like that's just what this team, unless they finally click on how they play hockey at 5-on-5 and they suddenly are miraculously, you didn't even do anything.
Dude, I just sat here. I didn't even do anything.
Is it because it looks like you gave a thumbs up? No, because I would do a thumbs up emoji. It must be. It must be the thumbs. Fascinating. You got to beat them on special teams. Their special teams is worse than you. You got to take advantage of that, and that's going to be your best chance to get one past Sorokin because he is, like you said, he is going to get the nod in this game. So I think that's the key to the game, in my opinion.
Fair enough.
Scotty, any final thoughts?
We ball, baby.
We ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow, recapping this one. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.